So at this point, I would like to show you the UI. As you can see, we have, thank you. So we have a browser-based UI, and this is the home screen. As soon as you log in with your username and password, this is what you get. And you can see it is based on browser and HTML5, so that makes it easy for your entire team. Once the system is set up, anybody who has a PC can just log in with your browser and you're good to go. There's no client-side software which you need to load for doing the testing. And it has a lot of different tiles, which you can see at this point. On the left side, you can see cybersecurity assessment, where you can run apps and attacks one after another. You can see how your systems can recognize them or not. You have application identification, where you can send a bunch of different apps together and see if your application is being identified by your system, or if you just want to see the impact of that on your infrastructure, you can do that. And also at the bottom left, you have the reliability testing, which is a soak test, where you run a test for, let's say, extended period of time, 24 hours, 48 hours, and see how your systems react to it. Maybe over time there are buffers which get filled out, or memory which is leaking, and that might have an impact on your performance. You can do those kind of testing as well. So the things which you see on the left, they have come from mainly the studio performance side of our product, which we got from our Mu Dynamics acquisition. And on the right side, you see those are the tests where you have mixed application test. Here you can have a mix of apps, and then still you can get really high performance with it, and you can see what kind of impact it has on your environment. It's very easy to change percentages. It already comes with a default percentage. So all these different tiles are not just test scenarios. These are test methodologies where there is intelligence built into the into every case. So we have already put in things like, if you look at throughput with mixed apps, we have done research on what is the typical general throughput mix, and we have created that as a default. You don't need to keep it the same. You can change it, but we come with a default one which you can use if you don't want to change anything. So it makes it very easy to run a test because the methodology is rolled in, and it also makes it easy for you to modify it.
And I see I see you have a link up there in the UI that says store. Are you guys going to have like an app store, I guess, where you can buy additional?
Yeah. So basically, it's not an app store. Let me just click into one of our things. You go and look at our library. We have like 3,200 scenarios which you can bring in, and right now this is just a demo system which we have set up. So on the top right, it says in offline mode because it's not internet connected. This is just a pre-release system which we are showing. So if it is internet connected, then you can have access to the store and you can download all the latest applications and attacks. It's a subscription model for that portion, where you'll have apps, attacks, and malware which you can download, and you'll always be on the latest one.
Is there going to be any sort of like community capability there, where if somebody else writes a specific test, share that somehow? That's
a very good point. We are in discussion for that. Right now we have the first release coming out, so we have the whole platform built and set up. That is one of the things which we are looking at, because we know that as a solution provider, we can do certain things, but our customer and the community can also bring in quite a bit of value to those kind of scenarios. Absolutely. So we are looking into that right now. This is the first release, so we are giving you a sneak peek of that today.
So you are looking at the ability to encode frames?
Yeah. So we do have capabilities of bringing in your your own PCAPs and things like that with our scenario language, where you can bring your custom environment communication, and then you can replicate that, add it with our mix, and then do that. That's already there. But in terms of sharing it with the whole community, having that kind of impact, we are looking into that.
So I can sorry, just a quick follow-up. So I can do a packet capture, Wireshark, export it, you can ingest it, replicate it, and put it on the wire. Very cool.
So just to make sure, so you're providing both client and server side here?
Yes. Yes, we are providing both client and server side. So let me go back and just show you one throughput with mixed application test. Here we have, this is the UI, how it looks. If you look at the different pieces here, the first one here, it shows the duration, how much you want. Here is the load specification. We have fail criteria, like you want to say, okay, if it goes below 5%, consider it to be fail, below 3%, consider it to be fail, based on how much is your target load.
Now, sorry to interrupt you, but
no worries.
From the previous question on, can you just do the client side? So can I use this to stress test my actual application infrastructure?
So for that, the hardware on which this is running, that also supports our Avalanche commander. That can do one-arm testing today. So over time, we are going to bring in more feature set into Avalanche Next. So in the first release, Avalanche Next does not have one-arm testing capability where you are connecting to a server, but we do have on the same hardware, you have capabilities with our...
So right now, this is focused at testing the network performance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But you can still...
I would love to
on a
have
one-arm
the other
testing,
one.
on one-arm testing, you can do fuzzing. Like fuzzing could be one-arm testing scenario, where you're testing, an endpoint, and you're sending HTTP, and you're sending, millions of mutations of HTTP constructs, and seeing what's the impact on your end system. So that, from a one-arm standpoint, this can do today.
No, but I would love to have to define a typical mix of URLs that people use in my application, which I could get, for example, from the log files.
Yeah.
And then you do that test, the stress testing, so that when I deploy, I don't know, a different application infrastructure or different number of scale-out servers or next release of the application, you can do, let's test if this works.
So that can be done with our on the same hardware, not with this UI at this point. Yeah, absolutely. And the idea is to bring that capability in right after we launch this as the first. So just to give you a basic idea about how to set up a test, you can see that here it shows a pie chart of the mix of traffic. So we have different, HTTP, SMTP, different traffic types, and we already have set a certain percentages for the default mix which we see typically based on the research which we have done, looking at some of the data which is out there. But many customers say, hey, this is a great starting point. I'll do my base test with this, but then I want to change something. That's the first question, right? So they say, I want to have more of SIP at the expense of all the other protocols. So I can just change that. Or they say, I want to have more SIP at the expense of just this BitTorrent. So you can just keep your control key pressed, and you change this, it just increases SIP. Or you say, okay, I do not need this protocol, so you just get rid of that. And you can, so it's that easy to set up a mix of tests. And other than that, you need to set your client-side ports and your server-side ports. Those are the main, the main aspect of setting up a test. So I just drag and drop my subnet here. I pick, let's say, one port. I say OK. I drag here, and I pick another port. So now my test is set up. All I need to do is, run the test. I can change my load to, like at this point it's 10 gig. I can make it lower. I can, I can even do how slow I want to ramp up, how fast I want to ramp up. So the whole idea is to make it, very easy for users to set the things up, and it's intuitive. That there's not like a big giant book which you have to read before you can run a test. So
and each of these tests is like a semantically correct protocol conversation, right?
Yes.
Like an actual.
Yes.
Right, because if you're having firewall inspect this stuff, it's got to be
it's
a real SIP conversation or a real
stateful conversation. It has a full, TCP handshake if it's a TCP-based conversation. It has the full, stack implementation.
And if it's something that's like an FTP pull, I mean, is that going to do a proper, slow start ramp up and everything like that?
It will behave the way FTP would behave. So all those individual protocols are, exactly the way it would behave on the wire if you're doing it from a PC, let's say.
Can I save the test scenario so I can replay it later with different boxes, for example, or topologies?
Yes. So you can see here when we go back on the left side where I picked my subnet, it's not only subnet, but there are also different tests which I can have. And not just that, you can look at right now we just have demo and demo 2, but you can see all the tests and configuration which are created by me versus my team member, and you can say, hey, you can share it with that. Another benefit of this is because it's based on HTML5, all I need is a browser. I can kick off the test from my phone, iPhone, or any smartphone, and then it gets queued. So at times, if you have a port which is being used by another team member, I kick off a test, it will get queued. As soon as the port is available, it will run the test. By the time I come into the office, that test is run already, and I can look at the report.
That's cool.
Yeah, so thank you.
Can you, if you're actually testing firewall performance or conformance at all, do you have anything that will actually do the equivalent of like DHCP fingerprinting, so you can present what your end client device actually looks like to your firewall, so you can actually figure out, am I doing fingerprint matching correctly?
So DHCP fingerprinting?
Yeah.
Like, Paul, do you know about
any of the OS fingerprinting?
At this point, do we have DHCP fingerprinting in the solution
Can you present to like a firewall that you want to pass through on testing? Can you actually present it? I want to look like an OS 10 device of this rev release. I want to look like Windows 7 with this patch release. I want to look like Windows 8. I want to look like 8.1. Whatever OS version as you're passing through on the app side.
Yeah, you can chime in.
Okay, so this is Sarvesh Rao, the product manager for Avalanche Next, and from our Avalanche perspective, we can using the other software product that we have, Avalanche, you can do DHCP fingerprinting. For that matter, you can customize any of the parameters in the client communication, not just DHCP. So you can simulate a Windows client, Linux client, Ubuntu, what have you.
Okay, and can you match for like for RFC 6555 for that behavior type, so you can tell, I look like I'm trying to determine whether I'm using V6 or V4?
Absolutely. You can customize the client to represent any of the platforms out there.
Cool.
So I just want to make sure I'm validating this. So I can take a TCP stream out of Wireshark, replay it. I can modify headers, modify the frame, and then put it on the wire, and then if I wanted to Ivan's point, replicate it
1,000 times.
Fire up as many streams as I want for stress testing.
Yep. It will actually, and what you actually have on the Avalanche is you have two with physical interfaces just to take it down to that level. It has an outbound and an inbound. So you actually send it, and there's a receiver, and then the other interface will play back the tracket stream coming back the other way.
So it plays both sides.
So it plays both sides. So you can take a packet capture off your existing firewall, capture it for a day, build some sort of a model, and then take it out to your Avalanche, and then plug it to your brand new firewall that you're about to use.
Hey. Stop right there. So I can actually take capture of my existing traffic.
Yes.
And replay it through another vendor's firewall.
Yes.
To see how that one would work. Yay!
And then so now take it a step further. The area where this most excites me is because I was thinking about this when we were on my third vodka yesterday, when we were at the because alcohol and inspiration go together. Is how we talk about virtual appliances and everybody says, Greg, virtual appliances don't work.
That's the other one,
right?
Yes.
Virtual appliances don't work because you don't know how fast they go. So if you can imagine, you can now go up to your firewall today, do a packet capture of your firewall, then plug a create the virtual appliance, a Viata, a CSR.
I hope the VMware guys are listening to this.
And then what you do is you plug your Avalanche in, and then replay that traffic through the virtual appliance, and then you'll know what your performance level would be. Or you can get a view or a perspective or feedback, and you can see the collapse point. So if you've ever used one of these things, the most amazing part about this was once I did a firewall test, it was on a checkpoint firewall, which is part of my reason that I'd get so disgusted at them. And what we did is we played an Avalanche through a checkpoint firewall and we fired in the traffic load and it went up, right? And then the checkpoint got to 70% of stated maximum, vendor stated maximum, then it flatlined, then it collapsed, it rebooted, and then it locked. So the checkpoint operating system is so bad that it didn't even run at the maximums, and when it collapsed catastrophically, and then because you kept sustaining the firing the load at it, it never came back. We had to go in and power cycle the firewall to bring it back to life. Right? So that's what this sort of testing shows you. So I'm really excited about this stuff for virtual SDN networks. So if I've got a, if I'm going to go and buy this, this Viata firewall and put it in a VM, how much traffic do I need?
Yeah.
I don't know, because my virtual CPUs are indeterminate. So now I can build traffic models, fire them at a VM, and say this firewall is certified by me at 100 megabits per second.
Of the traffic which you would see
in
your
real life traffic that you would see in. Now, when you do that replay, are you delaying the acknowledgements, for example? So if the firewall is slower than the previous one, it may not just drop packets, it will queue them, eventually process them, so it will delay them.
Yeah. So
do you handle that?
So based on some of the solution which we have existing with our Avalanche Commander, we can even do, like, once we import something, we can change the timing of it, saying that you want to maintain the timing or you want to collapse the timing, because at times when you capture it, it might be slower than what you want to do it when you're testing it, because you want to increase the potential stress on the infrastructure.
So you can say, for example, and now this is getting really exciting. So you can say, I have my firewall which is at 60% performance. Now, I know my load will increase by 100% in the next 2 years. And because I'm buying a new box, I want to have the existing load, squeezed it to get twice the bandwidth, and throw that at the new boxes that I'm testing.
Exactly. So for capacity management, right? So at times it might be successful today, but you also need to see how long can it sustain based on the graph of growth which you're seeing.
Take this a step further, right? This is the one I've actually used it for, and now this is why I no longer use application gateways in any of the firewalls, right? So what I've done is I've taken a firewall which is running, rated at 500 megabits per second, taken my existing stochastic traffic load, whatever it is that's going through, captured it, and then you play it, and then you say, right, I'm now going to add email gateway, or we're adding a new service, or we're adding a new something. So then I add that load on top. And then I watch it. You would
add that as one of their application mixes.
Yeah, that's right. So what you're saying is I'm now going to add a brand new email service. They're bringing up brand new email servers. They're predicting 200 megabits per second of extra email. And the security guy says, I want to run it through an application layer gateway. Does my firewall survive? And of course, the 200 meg application layer gateway doesn't survive. It dies. You run the but you've got your baseline load. This is my standing load that I have during the day, like this. And and it runs. Then you run the 200 megs of email load and it dies, and the firewall just...
So you can actually, if you have a spare box somewhere to test this, you can play the what-if scenarios with it.
Yes, you can do this on a live box. So one of the things that I've done...
Maybe not.
What I've done
at your own risk.
What I've done is at night, is just do it at night, and I'm just testing application layer gateways. So I run minor loads, at midnight, and you do it remotely. You don't have to go and be there, and you just run that application layer.
Oh, you have to be there to power cycle the firewall.
Well, of course, you've got a power rail, haven't you? Console port.
Or you can have restarters, right here. You can have monitors and restarters. You can send SNMP messages.
Well, all you do is you bring up your application layer gateway, and then you go in here and you just adjust your mix. To push the additional traffic.
Because your firewall doesn't just do one thing, right?
No, what you do is you connect the two ports to the inside and outside of the firewall, and then with the regular traffic running through your production firewall, you just throw something more at it to see if it crashes.
Right. Yep, exactly. The
other one is the ramp. So the one I like about it is you can actually, how fast, because you can actually see a firewall. If you throw 100,000 HTTP connections in 5 seconds, you'll see the firewall fall. Firewall will die, right? But that's not a very practical test in real life. Really, you're going to see a ramp of 100,000. A ramp. And this is really important because if you have flash campaigns, so if you work for a .com, I've worked for .coms who do these flash campaigns where they say, click here now to place your bet. You know, there's a horse running around in a circle or a dog falling down or something, you know, a football player.
Okay, well, I get the idea.
So there are gaming sites, for example, where they actually say, if this guy click here to bet now, that some person on a paddock is going to kick a piece of pigskin through the sticks, right? Mm-hmm. And click here. And that can generate 10,000 HTTP sessions as people literally click on whether he'll kick the piece of pigskin through the sticky wiggy things. Mm-hmm. And, this stuff matters because we actually had firewalls collapse because 10,000 sessions in 5 seconds was causing the firewalls to go down.
Yeah.
Yes, so he can generate the spikes, not the long-term load.
Yeah, there's many aspects to testing that once you actually get into this sort of thing, you go, there's sustained load, there's transient loads, there's spike loads, there's mixed loads. So if you never run ALGs.
Profile there where you have multiple
spikes. Can you change that envelope to be more complex?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point, this is with the first release, we have, ramp up, ramp down, and you can adjust that. Over time, we are going to add more, things like sawtooth, stair step, those kind of things are going to come in, subsequent releases. I wanted to bring your attention to the other aspects here. As you can see, we have throughput test. This can do line rate, layer 4 through 7 throughput.
That's 10 gig, right?
Yeah, line rate 10 gig.
What about your virtual appliance? How much traffic can that actually push out and test?
So the thing is, right now we have this Avalanche Next. We also have Avalanche Commander, which works on the same hardware. That has a virtual component to it, which can be used with the same UI. Like, it does not matter if it's virtual or physical, and then you can send traffic, between those. We have seen you can have multiple virtual in a single hardware, multiple ports to add more capabilities. We have seen little over a gig kind of traffic, which can go, so you can have 10 ports and then aggregate that over your 10 gig NIC if you want to test that. And at times we have seen some interesting behavior. Sometimes there was a virtual appliance like a firewall which we were looking at, and traffic sent from a virtual port or from a physical port to a virtual port and back, that communication was fine in terms of latency. Then we did one more test where we sent traffic from a virtual port to another virtual port on the same physical hardware going through the virtual appliance, and the latency was almost 5 to 10 times what it was from the physical to virtual. And I was stunned. I expected it to be much faster because it's just going internally, but I guess it was not tuned for that scenario.
TCP offload.
Yeah. Exactly. So it was that.
Quick question on deliver as virtual. What about the API? And so the scenario that I'm thinking. So if you're doing development on a platform, right? Mm-hmm. So integrating this sort of thing into CI would be interesting.
Yeah. So this works with RESTful API. Mm-hmm. So you can use that to do your automation.
Validate on pushes.
Yeah.
Oh. So you don't have to use the fancy graphic stuff. You can actually program it through the API.
Yeah.
Finally.
Yeah. Because through RESTful
Love
API.
it.
Yeah. So in this case, as I'm showing the connections per second, this can give the spike which Greg was talking about. This can, in a single physical hardware, we have done more than 3.5 million connections per second. So that should take care of majority of your spikes, seasonal spikes, weekly spikes, or monthly spikes, which you might expect of slew of connections coming on.
In the case of the replaying captured data, live application stuff, we've described it as replaying PCAPs.
Yep.
I suspect it's much more complicated with you're replaying the applications.
Yes.
To take because you got to worry about pat stuff on the wall and unpredictable stuff. Is that what's going on there?
Exactly. So when you say capture replay or you say packet replay, it's actually application replay. You're replaying the application over a TCP implementation. Just like in Avalanche Commander, we have application replay where everything above layer 4 is what we ported, and all the other things we still have control over. So you can still maintain, you can blow it up into 1,000 or 1,000,000 IP addresses and change the timing of your TCP, do all of that stuff while still doing your payloads above that or any data above that, maintaining that. So
that's what I suspected it must be, but that sounds harder than merely replaying CCAS.
Yes, it is much more complex. But yes, when you get it done with a import, you don't see what's happening in the back, so it at times makes it feel like, oh, it's just simple.
Right, got it. But I mean that makes it usable. So.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Essentially, what it's doing is just using the layer 7 header, and it regenerates everything else.
Yeah. So we also have fuzzing here, where you can do resiliency and robustness testing. So if you're looking at any new piece of application-aware device which you're putting in your network, you can just by default run them through the HTTP fuzzing, because all of them would probably support HTTP as a protocol. So you can run through HTTP fuzzing and see how they handle that communication. Because in fuzzing is when you look at some of the construct of HTTP and then you start tweaking it incorrectly at times. You create millions of different mutations. And we use protocol spidering for creating the mutations intelligently to see how the systems react to it. Of course, at times they would crash, and for that we also have implementation of monitors and restarters, because you'll need to monitor if your system is up. You poll it every few transactions, and then you see, oh, it's down, I need to restart it. Otherwise, if I have a 2-day test running, after the first hour, if it crashes, I've wasted my entire weekend. Monday morning, I don't have results. So
now, in the case that it detects a failure there, can you tell which transactions or which events were the last N that happened before that failure was detected? So you have some idea of what triggered?
Yep, you can do that.
And this is one arm mode, right?
Yeah, this is one arm.
So can I use this to detect SQL injection vulnerabilities?
So the vulnerabilities that we offer, we have thousands of vulnerabilities that is basically packed exploits. So they include SQL injections as well. Yeah.